Do you know anyone that does not know the name Steve Jobs? Today, I will be giving you information about Steve Jobs. There are three main ideas about Mr. Jobs I will discuss. I'll start by talking about his background. Then, I will talk about his development in Apple. And finally, I will finish by informing you about his more recent accomplishments and his death. I'll start by telling you about Steve's background. Jobs was born in San Francisco, California on February 24th, 1955. In 1972, Steve enrolled at Reed College. Reed College is a prestigious college, to say the least, and it's also a very expensive college. Steve did not know what he wanted to do, and his parents were very poor. Nevertheless, he made it in, and they paid for it. Unfortunately, he dropped out 6 months later. In 1973, Jobs got a technician job with Atari. He and Steve Wozniak, his partner, in college they created a game called Pong. And Wozniak basically gave Steve Jobs the right to the game, and he went to Atari and gave it to him. And according to Atari's co-founder, Nolan Bushnell, later described Steve as difficult but valuable, pointing out that he was very often the smartest guy in the room, and he would let people know that. Now let's move on and discuss his role in the creation of Apple. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak created Apple Computer Company. Many people were skeptical, to say the least, about the creation of Apple. It was basically just two guys in their parents' garage making motherboards at first. And that's all they did. At first they didn't create any computers, they didn't create any phones, they just created motherboards, and nobody really wanted that. Everybody just wanted a simple computer that they could just plug in. Later that year, Apple Computer came out with the Apple I. They finally realized what people wanted. They saw the need for the basic home use computer and the basic company use computer. So that's what the Apple I was. It was a computer that you could just plug in, you could plug in the mouse and the keyboard, and it would be ready to go. As stated by Ronald Wayne, Wozniak single-handedly invented the Apple I computer. This is a true statement many people say this is a true statement, some say not. It's well known that Steve Jobs was hard to work with. Steve Wozniak said it, everybody said it. And whenever Ronald Wayne said this, later in the year, people were skeptical. They didn't want to believe it. But everybody later accepted the fact that Steve Jobs was hard to work with. And then in the early 1980s, Apple came out with the Macintosh computer. This was the first real accomplishment of Apple. They were struggling the whole time when the Apple I came out, when the Apple II came out. Nobody liked it, stock was down, and whenever the Macintosh came out, it jumped a little bit because people were like, hey, this might become successful, this might actually go somewhere. Finally, I will be informing you about his more recent accomplishments and his death. The first iPod was released in 2001. This was the real big break that Apple was hoping for. They needed it. It was amazing. Everybody loved it. The only other competition was the Zune that Microsoft came out with, and it was nowhere close to the technological capabilities of the iPod. The first iPhone was released in 2007. I'm holding an iPhone 5C. This was recently released. But the first iPhone was also a big accomplishment. People were amazed that a phone could have applications. You could surf the web, you could check your email, you could text people, and you could call people all at the same time. There were a couple of other phones like that, the Palm, but nowhere close to the technological capabilities of the iPhone. Steve died on October 11, 2011 from respiratory arrest. Steve had a tumor in his lungs, and it was well known. He tried to keep it hidden, but obviously some things are hard to hide. He was on leave from his job for about 6 months, and that's how everybody basically found out. Steve Jobs once said, "No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's changing agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new." I just told you 3 different things about Mr. Jobs' life. I started by giving you information on his background. Then I informed you about his role in the creation of Apple. Lastly, I gave you information about his most recent accomplishments and his death. Another well-known quote by Jobs goes like this: "Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of the rules. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may say that they seem as crazy, we see genius, because the ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that do."